Then the other thing I want to talk about is as a remittance system. Remittances are huge. Looking into some of these numbers that I'll share with you, they look like they're a joke because they're just unbelievably huge. And it's a very interesting industry, and it also has a lot of different players from different types, but we're going to kind of focus on one in particular. And then as a store of value, I mean, this is very controversial. A lot of people would not necessarily agree that Bitcoin is a long-term store of value. But if you think about it competing with gold, and a lot of the people who think about gold and keeping gold in their accounts as a way to hedge against certain things like inflation and central bank volatility, you could potentially see Bitcoin as another hedge like that. To limit the scope of the talk, I wanted to focus a little bit on the USA, on the American market. We'll talk a little bit about international stuff, but especially as you talk about remittances, obviously you have to talk international, but also remittances between other country pairs are actually quite significant, and I don't know much about them. And so I'd love to hear some audience perspectives on that if you have them. And then I wanted to talk about first order effects, and what I mean by that is, if I mean, maybe this is a bad example, but if Visa is going down due to the Bitcoin rise, I don't want to talk about like the spouses of Visa employees and how they're going to suffer and their children are going to suffer and our armed forces will suffer because they happen to have a high correlation, like that kind of thing. I don't want to actually get into that. I'll kind of stay at the high level. So the first thing, I mean, I took what is probably, you can find 100 different maps on the internet of how payment processing works and what a payment processor is, and I don't think there's even a very good definition. But the way I'm thinking about it here is this is a really simplified chart here, right? There's an issuing bank, and that owns the customer, and that might be a Citibank, where you have a Citibank Advantage Visa or something like that. And then there's a merchant bank, and the merchant bank, that one owns the merchant, that person who's taking your money or you're paying someone to. And so when you swipe your credit card, you're the customer, Target is the merchant. Target, probably a bad example right now, but anyway, Target's the merchant. The payment processor is the network generally that facilitates that transaction. There's all kinds of different payment processors that take different levels of risk, that have capital, don't have capital, just provide technology, just provide the services. There's unbelievably amount. I mean, if you just Google payment processor, gateways, all those kind of things, it starts to get very confusing. And for somebody who's not in the payments industry day to day, it's actually pretty tough to see why certain things are happening. But the biggest thing you'll see talked about is the interchange fee. And the interchange fee is generally paid by the acquiring bank, the bank that wants the funds from the customer, to the issuing bank via the payment processor, in which in this case would be something like Visa. It creates a little bit of a problem because Visa's fee, MasterCard's fee, is generally pretty stable. It's actually pretty well published for most merchants. Now, something like a Walmart or a Costco or even like a Neiman Marcus, things like that can get very good differential rates based on how they decide their payment structure. But Visa has a fee out there of a few dozen basis points, but they can change their interchange fee, and they're really incentivized to change their interchange fee because the difference that they are adding is going to the issuing bank, which is then incentivized to issue more Visas. So